This is our data map overview. So we are going to look at all the components of data map. Um, it is an application in the Progress Book suite that some people are just using for RIMPS. Some people are using it to store data assessments. And some people just aren't sure what it is. So I wanted to go over data map, a quick overview, and then take some deep dives throughout the rest of this school year and into next school year. So if you are looking on the screen, those are our deep dives that I will be looking at more of these in depth. Grad Points is coming up in April, assessments in multiple measures will be in May. And then starting the next school year, we'll start off with RIMPS because I know a lot of districts are using those and preparing for our sixth graders to be on RIMPS. Um, and then I will do another overview so you can share with other administration, maybe your testing coordinator and so forth, so they can see the overview of it. And then a deep dive into the admin menu, talking about assessment imports, our data map, EMIS codes, things like that. So, the ones that are after this school year from the RIMP on, those are not yet posted in Event Scheduler because we are going to be changing our system over the summer. So grad points and assessments are in there, and then I will get the new ones in the new system, and those will be on our website under the Events tab once that is released sometime in June. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on um, our data map overview. So, yes, I am in gradebook. So, data map overview, I'm going to start with the teacher gradebook screen. Because our data map overview, um, data map is a part of the suite and it is built right into gradebook for our teachers. So, depending on what you use for data map for, there can be notifications for our teachers. So I'm using a demo database and it is very slow, so be patient with it. But the if you are using the RIMPS or the student interventions, which most of our districts are not using, but it is an option, you will get little symbols in gradebook as a teacher that's saying that there is some type of intervention for that student. And I think most of us now are using the students has disabilities concern, the disability alert for our students that have documents in same goal. So this is just coming right from the RIMP screen in data map and it populates into the teacher's gradebook. Another option that the teacher can do if they click on the student's name or if they click on the arrow next to the student, they can go right into the student's roadmap. As soon as they click on the roadmap, that opens up data map for them and takes them into that individual student. So we're going to look at the roadmap first, and then we're going to go through all of our navigation except for our admin, because not everybody on here is an admin of data map. So looking at the student roadmap, we're going to start off with our demographics. It is pulling all this information from student information. So your student ID, their birth date, any their building, if they have any gifted. So if they've been identified as gifted and those are flagged in student information, those are also going to populate here. So you can see as I hover over them, it will tell you what area that they are gifted in. Most of them are pretty common sense, except for social studies is a C. So it can't be the S because it's already used for science. Why they didn't just do SS, not sure, but it is a C. If there is an IEP, that will be flagged. However, it does not take you to a direct link to special services because none of our districts use special services anymore. We use same goal. With that being said, same goal is we're going to be working with Progress Book to get a little bit of an extra link in there so that the two systems can work a little bit more closely. If your student is an EL student, that will be marked here, as well as a 504. So all of these pull from student information. The RIMP will pull from DataMap. So if you are using the RIMP feature within DataMap and there is one created, it will state yes there. And then if there's a grad plan, I have a fifth grade student, but some of our upper grades have grad plans. And if that is created, that will be identified here, as well as a link to that grad plan. And I'll show you another way that you can get to grad plans in a little bit. And to me, this is just it's useless information, but it is there. If you are a person that's doing home visits and you're visiting your student, this takes you to a direct link to Google Maps so you can see where your student lives. So, also on the screen is your interventions. If your district is using any interventions, we are not, for the student, doesn't have any, but the interventions would be listed here. Those might be things such as title. Some have used it in the past for RTI forms, behavior interventions, things like that. But like I said, a majority of our districts are not using it for interventions, but that is an option. RIMPS, if the student has a RIMP, that will be listed here, and any previous RIMPs. So now, according to the state, we are going up to sixth grade to have students on RIMPs. So if that student has been on a RIMP since first or second grade, all of those will be listed, the previous ones, if you have been using this for RIMPs in previous years. Same with attendance. You will see the running record of attendance for previous years. And then you will also see that in previous years, the hours were not listed. They are now currently listed in here according to HB 410. We're going by hours versus days. So currently they're both available, but in previous years, only days of attendance was available. And then you can have a graph here if you click on that. Discipline incidents. So if you are using the discipline module in student information, any discipline instance will appear here. If you are not sure and you're like, oh, I didn't know that there was a discipline feature in student information, there is going to be a training on that on May 1st. So then anything that is put into student information would automatically come over to the student roadmap. The school year summary is going to show the current school year except for your state tests. Your state tests, since they're taken in the spring and usually the results aren't um, available until late in the school year, sometimes after school gets out, those show for the current school year, even though they took them at the end of the previous school year. All other tests, such as MAP, if you iReady, anything like that that you are importing, those would show up in the current school year. Your state assessments, that would show any of your state testing. So your state testing is English and math and social studies, could be science. You are not going to use reading for your state test. It goes by English, but your data points, which are your third party assessments, typically go by reading. Why they do it differently on the 2 different ones, I'm not sure, but that's how it works. So if I click on English, you will see that the previous years, not just the current year for my students, is going to populate. So I see the current one, which should be the same as the above, the 772, and then all the previous years when this student took that test and what the grade level is. Ignore that it's all the same test. This is a demo database and the students don't progress in grades. Okay, and then if I would check on math, same thing, my math assessments would populate as well for the current year as well as all the previous. Okay, and then for my data points, again, those are any of your third party assessments such as iReady, um, Acadience, anything that you're using in your district. If I pull up my reading, it is going to show my reading assessments for whichever data point I use. So in this case, I have Dibbles, Ames Web, and those are all going to be listed there. So if I have any other ones like MAP, it'll just keep the list and it'll keep the running record. So you can see there's my fall, winter, and spring testing for each of the years for that student. And then my math as well. So if I show my math, the same thing will populate. If there are any assessments that have a composite score, such as your ACT, which we'll get into a little bit later on, but any composite scores would be listed under other. So now let's take a look at our navigation menu, starting with our home screen. So if you sign into DataMap, this is where you are going to start. There are three areas that you can search by. You can search by your student, you can search by an intervention type, which includes RIMPS, and you can search by assessment type. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about how the breakdown works, and then we'll get into each of the other navigations as well. So if I'm looking at this, I can search for an individual student. I can type in their last name. But my student that I had in context, Gloria Ball, if I just type in Ball, if there is no other person with that last name, it will automatically populate their student roadmap. But because there is somebody else that has BALL, it is going to have a list, or for example, siblings within the district. So if you have other additional siblings in the district, they're all going to be listed depending on what building you have access to. So sometimes the using just the student search is it doesn't necessarily break it down. You might need a little bit more. Okay, I see a question in the chat. I'm looking at the data point history, clicked on other. I'm not seeing the ACT scores. So couple things, Jody. And I'm assuming you are at the high school, like you have high school access. But that would be one thing that we need to check is what access you have. The second thing is I would have to look at your assessments and when it was last imported, because I'm not sure if anybody was importing the ACTs at your district. So those are two things that we can look at, and we'll look at them at the end to make sure what is going on. Um, if you are a teacher, and I know a lot of us on here are not in the classroom per se, you are in the office. If you do have a teacher role, though, so some of you have a teacher or counselor or principal, whatever it might be, your name might be in context here. So if your name is in context and you're doing a some type of search, it might not show you information because you actually you're not a teacher of record of students unless you do have a class. So if your name is listed there, you might need to take your name out of context so you can do that student search. So just be aware of that. Those of you that are more in the admin roles, always check to see if your name is listed in context. If you do have a teacher, and I should have picked a teacher with an A last name, but if you do pick a teacher, then what's going to happen is all their classes will load. So then you can pick and look at the students in a particular class. So Gloria was in my Math 5 class. So I can click on that, hit search, and it's going to show me all of the students that are in Math 5. And I'll show you how to use that a little bit later on too when we're kind of narrowing down our students. But other ways that you can search, you can look for students with IEPs, EL students, students on RIMPS. Not everybody is going to have the economically disadvantaged. That is what your district has decided to see who can see that and who cannot see that. So again, that is a feature. And then withdrawn students, not withdrawn students. That is one downfall of DataMap is it will always show withdrawn students as well if they have, because a lot of them have tested within your district. So if you want to see them during that class period when they tested with that teacher, it's still going to show those withdrawn students. So if you do not want to see them in your search, you would definitely say no. Okay. If you want to see only gifted students, what ability they are gifted in, anything like that, you can break all the student search down, as well as any membership groups if you have those in your setup in your district, which a lot of us do. But that's depending on your district. Our intervention search, like I said, a lot of us are not using the intervention per se, but you are using the RIMP, which is considered an intervention. So again, you can search by teacher and if they have a RIMP, yes or no. So if you want to see all those students that have RIMPs, you can hit find and it's going to bring up those students only. However, there is an option in your navigation that you can bring up those students anyways. And then your assessment, what assessment you want to look at. Yes, there are some older assessments in there, but there might be some older students that have that data in there. But we would look at our OST, either the summary or the standards, and I will break that down. And then we also have our data points. And then again, if you want to look at a specific grade or a teacher and so forth, you can look at that. Direct links to testing information are listed at the bottom as well as InfoHio. So, going back to our navigation, looking at the student tab, this is going to list all the students that you have access to. So, some of you might be panicking because you clicked on that and you're like, I don't see any students there, it's blank. One, it might be because of your access that you have. Um, So you might not have access to see students. So we would have to change that, or your name might be in context here and you need to remove your name because you are not actually associated with a class. Sometimes our intervention specialists are not teacher of record at class. So when they come into DataMap, they don't see the students that they need to see. So a lot of times they have building access so they can see all students within the building, or they are assigned a case management class, which is a non-graded, not reported to EMIS class. So then they have their caseload or their case management so they can see their students and the students' test data and so forth. Um, so so again, don't panic if you're not seeing anything, you just might not have the correct access or your name might be in context. So those things that we saw on the home screen are also listed here. I can search by a student, grade level, building, by a specific teacher and that class, and then you can see all those other things. I can break it down. One key thing if you are doing any type of search, so for example, I want to just search for my fifth graders, you have to hit find. So if you don't click find, it doesn't automatically adjust your search results. So once I click on that, you will see I only see my fifth graders here. So as we know, the State Department is moving up a grade level each year. So maybe some of these kids are going to be put on a RIMP. I don't have sixth graders, so we're going to pretend these are sixth graders. But if I select multiple students, I just click on their name. You can see I have additional buttons that pop up where I can add a group of students to a RIMP. These would be students that would be reporting the same RIMP codes to EMIS. So, if, some of them are fluency, I can click on the 3 kids that are going to be working with that and I can say add to a RIMP. If I just click on an individual student, so here's Gloria, if I click on her name, it takes me back into that student roadmap for that individual student. I'm going to hit back so I can go to my student list. And then you can see this list only tells a few little details about the student. Basically, the things that I can search for over here are what is listed across the top. If I take my grade level out of context, I have more data here because some of you will have full district access. So you might want to sort by grade level versus alphabetically. All of these columns are sortable. So if I click on this once, it's going to sort um, descending. So it's going to go from my highest grade level to my lowest. And if I click on it again, it'll show my lower grade levels. So, and then again, all of these, it'll search for blanks and then it'll search for my check mark. So those are ways I can look. at different information. Again, you might not see that economically disadvantaged. That is an optional setting that some districts turn on and some do not. It's based on your access. And then anytime you want to go back to alphabetical, you just click on name and you are back. Next is our state assessment. So you have two options. You have the summary and you have the standards. So, and this is the same as if you did from the home screen. If you did the assessment search, you can search the OST by standards or summary. Um, this is how it's broken down. The summary is a graph. It's a nice graphical representation of your test. So when I'm looking at this right now, it is showing me English language arts 1. So for that test, if I click on my drop down arrow, I have multiple tests listed here. So if I want to look at my fourth grade, it's now going to change my graph to the fourth grade testing. So if I look over here, this is based on what the test is. This over here is based on my school year. So just be aware of that when you're looking at it. That's kind of how it's broken down. So I'm looking at last year's test for 23-24. I want to look at the fourth grade. I want to just find that. And then you will see my numbers will change over here to just that grade level or just that test. Where this one was interactive at first, this one does not change until you filter out over here. But what is nice, if you see when I'm moving around, each of these are clickable as well as student count. So if I click on any of these, so if I click on my advanced, it will take me into the standards. So it's the same as going to my state assessment and going to standards. So it breaks it down by my students. So I picked that fourth grade ELA test. So it's showing my current fifth graders because I'm in the 24-25 school year. All my fifth graders alphabetically, their scores, their placements, and then each of the sub areas. It will also show me who the teacher was for the previous school year. So that was their ELA teacher and or reading teacher, however you have it coded in your district, and then who the subject teacher is now. If they're special ed, that will be checked. And then if they are gifted, it will also have that listed as well. And same concept here, all of these are sortable. So if you wanted to sort by scores, you can sort by score. So highest to lowest, lowest to highest, and so forth. Okay. And again, this is demo data, so we don't have a lot of everything and the students don't progress. So um, that's just how the data is set up. Over here, items can be filtered. So you can filter if you want to look at a specific teacher. So again, you're not necessarily a teacher of record, but you might want to look at a specific teacher. So you can pull up that teacher here as well at, or a grade level. So I am just looking at a grade level right now because I have that specific test selected. If I'm looking at a high school test, that might be a little bit different because you might have multiple grades taking an algebra end of course exam. So that is the difference between summary and standards. Next is looking at our data points, which is also assessments. So our data points would need to be imported by someone in your district. So whatever you use in your district, you can import. So if it's iReady, if it's Acadience, um, Ames Web. So our ACT is popping up for these students. So any of those things can be imported. So then you can see here. So this is where it gets a little tricky because here now my subject area is reading because our third party uses reading instead of English. Still the testing year, and then if I wanted to pull out specific grade levels. So if I'm looking at my students, it kind of breaks it down over here. Here is my test name, and then here are all the categories of the test, and then the month that the test was assessed. If I scroll over more, So you can see my Ames web and then each of the areas of my Ames web testing. If you had dibbles, it would say dibbles and then your fall, winter, spring assessments, as long as those are imported. And then you can see as well. So here's my maps, I believe. So then it breaks it down and it has your um, benchmark for each of those areas. And those all get imported with the import as long as it's imported with the correct file. So moving on, I'm going to look at interventions. So if I go to my interventions, there are two areas within interventions. So I have my student interventions. So this used to be popular because this was used for RIMPS back in the day before RIMP was added to DataMap. Um, it still is used sometimes for behavior interventions, maybe title, things like that. So you can create your own intervention groups. You can have intervention templates. So if you're using a specific table, those can be imported and then those can be applied to a student. So if I look at an intervention, I'm just going to modify this student. You can see what code they're using, the different tiers, who it was referred by, and then this was a template that they used, and this is the information that they wanted. Okay, so again, it is an option. Some districts use it or do want to use it. Some districts just use the RIMP feature. You can also add attachments here. So if you want to show any progress, you can attach those as well. So our other option under RIM under interventions is our RIMPS, and that's our most popular. So again, all of our students are pulling over from student information. If it is a classroom teacher, their name would be in context, and they would only see the students that they have access to. You, as a district person, if you have a district access, you would see all grade levels. Okay, so this is also only showing the students that already have a RIMP attached to them. So if it is a student that does not have a RIMP, you would have to find them in students to be able to add a RIMP to them, kind of like I showed earlier. So if I'm looking at any of my students, you can see some of my students are listed multiple times. That is because they have multiple RIMP program codes. So these codes are reported to EMIS. So all of the new program codes are in there for our high dosage tutoring. So if you have students on that, you can apply that RIMP code to those students that are needing that our prior year. So if they had, so these students in second grade, they had a RIMP, that is indicating that they had a RIMP in their prior year. So if I look at, I'm going to look at Griffin here. So if I look at Griffin, I can either click on his name to go to his roadmap and then open up the RIMP, or I can edit the RIMP by clicking on this little pencil here. So if I click on that, it is going to open up his RIMP. You can see all of the demographic information is going to populate automatically. The general information is going to show his tier 2 dyslexia screener if that was needed. Um, the start date, the initial assessment, which this, if it is imported, if STAR was imported, I can directly pull that in from DataMap. So the teachers and or whoever's creating the RIMPs doesn't have to enter that information. And then as well as any diagnostic measures that you're doing for the student. And same thing, if this information is imported into DataMap, you can import it right from DataMap versus having to manually enter that information. Under my reading components, I would have my program codes. So these are selected per school year. So you might have used something in a previous year, but you're not going to use it the next year. So you don't have to have all of the RIMP program codes available every year. So again, they get wiped out and you get to select those every year. The target area, And what type of instructional setting. So are they working in small group, large group, or individually? And then any progress monitoring you can have here as well. Same as our initial measurement. If it is imported into DataMap, I can import it right into my progress monitoring. And then if they're working with any tutors, those can be added as well. And then you can see there is additional areas for progress monitoring notes. You also have the ability for attachments. And then the collaboration is where you can have parents sign. Um, they do have digital signatures. So if they're meeting with parents during parent teacher conferences, it could be on an iPad, it could be on a digital board that they can sign, and then it can be printed out. Okay. Next is student objectives. This is not used anymore. Those were back in the day called SLOs. So that was a feature that is not being used any longer. The next is our grad points. So, our graduation information pulls from student information. So, as that information is being entered, it is also automatically coming over into DataMap. It is not something that has to be imported like our assessments. So, that's a little bit different. So, if I am looking at my students, I'm just going to pick by building. So, I want to look at my high school students. Good question. Before I go on with the grad points, question is, do teachers have access to add RIMP information or um, does there need to be an additional permission given? Teachers will have access to the students in that are assigned to them or scheduled to them in a class. So if we'll say second grade. So a second grade teacher has a reading class with 20 kids in there and say 6 of them are going on a RIMP, that teacher has access to create the RIMP for that student. Now, those 20 kids that are assigned to that reading class, they go to another class for writing, and that writing teacher wants to write a RIMP, but they're not the teacher of record. They would not have access to write the RIMP. The student has to be scheduled to the teacher, and we're trying to stress that in our scheduling classes. Don't just let the teachers add and hide students in their grade book, because it goes by what is scheduled in student information. So as long as they are scheduled to them, then they have access to create the RIMP or an intervention, like that. Okay. Good question, because I did forget to mention that. Okay, and that's why sometimes our intervention specialists, they don't actually have a teacher per se. A classroom teacher might share a grade book class with them, so that doesn't give them that doesn't actually give them access to see them in DataMap, because DataMap actually pulls from student information. So that is why we sometimes say, hey, you need to schedule um, those intervention specialists. To some districts use like a coach's class, or it might be a caseload class, something like that. So then that teacher is scheduled to them so they have access to them. Or, depending on your district, you might give an intervention specialist building access. Okay, so our graduation points, grad points, however you want to say it. I'm breaking it down and looking just at the high school. So you can see that if I'm looking at all of my students, they have this little symbol next to them. So if I click on this little symbol next to them, this is going to actually, oh, you know what? It will actually open a PDF of their graduation plan, the same as you would see it in student information. I'm in an incognito window, and so I have to download it. So give it a second. There it goes. So it will pull up again that exact graduation plan that you see in student information. It's going to be available in DataMap. So your classroom teachers who might not have access to student information can still have access to their graduation plan, because it is available in DataMap. Okay. And again, as long as the information is filled out, um, then that information populates on their grad plan and is available. Um, so you're going to see your overall status. So again, this is not necessarily used all the time, but it's a quick look. Okay, I'm looking at this student and I'm going to look at pair here. He's got 4 English classes. Great. He's met his requirements. Math, he's met requirements, and so forth. So it's just kind of a quick check. You can't add anything, change anything, modify anything. It's again just pulling from those grad points from student information if those are being completed. So that is your graduation requirements. So then if, or I'm sorry, that is, yeah, that is your graduation requirements. Then if I move on, I can move on to my graduation pathways. So if I say view all, it's just a big long scroll, or you can break it down. So my graduation pathways are going to show my state testing, so how they have placed. So if you remember when we looked at the state assessment, it showed the raw score. So it showed what they had, where in here in the grad points, it actually shows the performance level for those end of course tests. So it's just a different display, but it is the same information. So if they got a 700 and they're proficient, they're going to get a 3 in here for the performance level. So again, that would all be imported into student information and then which would populate here. So all of their assessments would be listed here. ACT and ACT and SAT are listed here. I think a majority of our schools do ACT in the 11th grade. So if you are one of the districts that test your entire 11th grade and import those, those would all populate here. If you use the SAT, then those would populate over here. But again, I think a majority of us are using the ACT, but whichever one you use and it's imported into student information, it will populate on this screen. And then, of course, your last area is your career readiness is also there with any industry credentials, but your competencies. So if they've met their ACT scores, if they have military enlistments, and so forth. So that is all going to be listed here. So again, we'll take a deep dive into that if you are interested more in graduation points. Next is looking at our analysis. So we have 2 areas in analysis. We have assessment comparison as well as multiple measures. So the assessment comparison, I'm not sure how often it is used because I'm not in an individual district, but this is where you can compare students and see how they have ranked according to the district. You can also look at teachers. So if you have multiple teachers, we'll just use Algebra 1 as an example, or math. We're using math. If we have multiple teachers teaching math, and we have a high success rate in this class, but not a high success rate in that class, you can compare those two. But, is one an inclusion class versus one is maybe, for those upper level kids. So let's look at our assessment comparison. By default, it will look at students. So again, it's looking at my OST, so my state assessment for my student. I have been looking at Gloria Ball, so we are going to pull her up. And it is showing what testing periods. So in this demo database, I'm just going to use all of them. And then if you want a specific test, so in this case, I am going to use my English and I'm going to hit find. So then what it breaks down is in a lot of you, um, except for I know Worcester, you're on here and you guys have multiple elementary buildings. Um, I think everybody else just has one elementary building. So it's not going to show you a whole lot between the building and the district. Just like us, you're going to be the same. The building and the district are going to be the same. Now, in Worcester's case, or some of our other, like East Homes, West Homes, that has multiple elementaries, this is going to be the district average, then it'll show the building average, and then it's the individual student. So then if I click on that, it is going to show when the testing period it was, who the student was, and what their scaled score is. So if I click on any of these for my student here, so if I click on that, it's going to show me, what test it was, when it was, and so forth. So that's kind of an interactive feature. And then if I click on her name, it's going to take me to her student roadmap where we already saw her school year summary. Okay. If I click on the building or the district, depending, it is going to show the average for the building, and or the district. If you click on the district, the total percent passing, who was above, at, and below, and then how many students were actually tested. So that's kind of a nice feature to have so you can kind of have an overview of each of the areas. Okay. So that is looking at a student. Now we can switch and we can look at a teacher. So if I want to look at a teacher, I need to do this better for next time and always pick A teachers. Um, oh, I need to go further. Freeman, Joan Freeman. And I think she was high school. Um, I didn't write my subject down. Oh, no, she's there. I think I picked math for her. Okay. So then this is going to show your district, your building, and then the individual teacher and how they ranked. So if your building only has one math teacher, um, there's not going to be any comparison. If you have multiple math teachers, you would have multiple teachers listed here. So, but then if I click on that, it is actually going to show the students' average, their passing percentage, and then in each of the areas and how many students had this teacher that were tested. Okay, so it kind of breaks it down that way. Our multiple measures is our other area within analysis. When I look at that, this is where you can compare the students' marks to what they got on their assessments. So depending on what assessment you're looking at, so if I want to look at the OST, oops, not OGT, and then what school years, and then what tests I want. So I'm going to do my fourth grade ELA test. But right here is the important thing where it says include course marks. So any mark that has been submitted for these students, if I include that and hit find, it is going to show what their assessment score was. Give it a second. It'll show what their assessment score was, how they did. Okay, so what their actual score was, each of the sub areas. And then if they have a grade, and you can see I didn't break it down by grade, so it's showing the grades of some of these other students. But if I broke it down by just my fifth grade students, it would have also their grade here. And then I can change the orientation so I can kind of see that a little bit cleaner. So you can see they have reading 5 and writing 5. They don't have an ELA class, so that's broken down. But I can say, okay, well, this student was getting C's and D's. How did they do? Well, they scored a 722. Okay. And actually their score was going down over the years, but again, it's just a way to compare how they're doing in their classwork versus how they did on the assessment. And then, of course, the admin tools will have a deep dive into that. And this is where you can manage and import some of your assessments and your RIMP codes. So again, that was an overview of the complete process of data map, going all the way from home and seeing it from the teacher's gradebook all the way through comparing their state assessments with their classroom assessments. Are there any questions? You can You can go to any of the chapters in the recording to look at that specific area if you want to share something with somebody. Maybe your district is not using RIMPS and you want to start using RIMPS. You can just go to that section. But remember, we will have those deep dives. So if you are interested more, like comparing and seeing where it's actually pulling from and grad points and so forth, you can register for some of these future trainings. So if there are no more questions, I will stop for everybody and thank you very much.